The turquoise waters of the Caribbean stretched out like an endless sheet of liquid sapphire beneath a sky so blue it almost hurt to look at it directly. Serenity Cay rose from the sea like a jewel someone had carefully placed there just for the privileged few. White sand beaches curved in perfect crescents, so fine and soft they felt like powdered sugar under bare feet. Palm trees leaned lazily toward the ocean, their fronds rustling in the constant warm breeze that carried the scent of salt, sunscreen, and distant hibiscus blooms. The island was small enough to feel intimate, large enough to get lost in if you wanted to. Every path was paved with smooth coral stone, lined with discreet lighting that would glow softly at night like fireflies guiding guests home. At the center of it all stood the main residence complex, a sprawling collection of low, modern villas built from white marble and glass, their roofs covered in living green roofs that blended seamlessly with the jungle behind them. Infinity pools seemed to spill straight into the horizon. Outdoor kitchens gleamed with stainless steel, ready for private chefs to prepare whatever the guests desired at any hour. A helipad sat on the northern tip, its concrete pad painted with a discreet silver logo that caught the sunlight. The entire place smelled of money, of calm, of absolute control over nature itself. Victor Kane, the owner of this private paradise, was a man who moved through the world with the quiet confidence of someone who had never been told no in decades. Tall, silver-haired, always dressed in perfectly tailored linen shirts and lightweight trousers that somehow never wrinkled in the humidity, he greeted new arrivals personally when the mood struck him. He was a financier, everyone knew that much. His name appeared in hushed conversations in boardrooms from New York to London to Hong Kong. He had a gift for spotting talent, for opening doors, for making things happen. And he liked surrounding himself with bright, beautiful, ambitious young women who wanted more from life than the ordinary path. The girl had been invited 3 weeks earlier. The email had arrived in her inbox like a golden ticket. Mr. Kane saw your portfolio and believes you have real potential. It read. A short stay at Serenity Cay could open doors you didn't even know existed. Modeling contracts, networking with people who matter, perhaps even a fresh start in a new city. All expenses covered. Private jet. Full confidentiality guaranteed. She had read it 5 times before she allowed herself to believe it was real. She had grown up in a small town where opportunities came wrapped in minimum wage uniforms and broken promises. This felt different. This felt like the moment everything changed. The flight on the Aurora Express had been like stepping into another dimension. The jet's interior was all cream leather and dark walnut, with wide reclining seats that turned into beds at the touch of a button. Soft classical music played through hidden speakers. Attendants in crisp uniforms brought chilled champagne in crystal flutes, fresh strawberries dipped in chocolate, and little savory pastries still warm from the oven. Mr. Kane wants you to arrive relaxed, one of them had said with a gentle smile. You're going to love it there. Everyone does. When the plane touched down on the short runway carved into the southern edge of the island, the heat wrapped around her like a velvet blanket. A golf cart waited, driven by a silent man in a white polo shirt and mirrored sunglasses. The ride to the main villa took only a few minutes, but every second revealed another layer of perfection. Hidden coves with kayaks lined up like soldiers, a tennis court with fresh white lines, a small marina where a sleek yacht bobbed gently at the dock. Birds with iridescent feathers darted between the trees. Everything was so carefully curated that it felt almost unreal, like walking through a high-end resort brochure that had come to life. Victor Kane met her at the entrance to the main house. His handshake was firm but not crushing, his smile wide and genuine. "Welcome to Serenity Cay," he said, voice smooth as aged whiskey. "I'm so glad you could make it. You're going to fit right in here." He introduced her to the small staff who appeared as if by magic, housekeepers in starched uniforms, a chef who already knew her dietary preferences from the questionnaire she had filled out days earlier, and a wellness coordinator who promised daily massages, yoga on the beach at sunrise, and whatever else her body or mind needed. Her assigned villa was breathtaking. Floor-to-ceiling sliding glass doors opened onto a private deck overlooking the sea. The king-sized bed was dressed in Egyptian cotton so soft it felt like sleeping on clouds. A marble bathroom featured a soaking tub big enough for two and a walk-in shower with rain heads. Fresh flowers stood in every room. On the nightstand lay a thick envelope containing $5,000 in crisp $100 bills. Pocket money, the note said, for anything you might need during your stay. She had never held that much cash in her hands before. The first evening unfolded like a dream. Dinner was served on the main terrace under strings of soft golden lights. Victor Kane sat at the head of the long teak table, surrounded by other guests. A famous fashion photographer from Milan, a tech entrepreneur who had just sold his startup for 9 figures, a British aristocrat whose family name opened every door in London, and several other young women who all seemed to glow with the same mixture of excitement and slight nervousness. The food was exquisite. Fresh lobster, perfectly seared scallops, wines that cost more per bottle than she used to make in a month. Conversation flowed easily. Everyone laughed at the right moments. No one asked too many personal questions. After dinner, there was music. A live jazz trio playing softly from the corner of the terrace. Someone suggested a walk down to the beach. The sand was still warm from the day's sun. The moon hung low and fat, painting a silver path across the water. One of the other girls linked arms with her and whispered, "Isn't this the most beautiful place you've ever seen?" She nodded, feeling the champagne and the warm night air make everything softer around the edges. Only 2 small details prickled at the back of her mind, so subtle she almost dismissed them. First, when she had stepped off the plane, the same silent man in the white polo had politely asked for her phone. "House rule," he explained with an apologetic smile. Mr. Kane values complete privacy for all his guests. No photos, no social media posts while you're here. It keeps the experience pure. "We'll return everything when you leave." She had hesitated for half a second, then handed it over. Everyone else had done the same without protest. The phones disappeared into a small black pouch that vanished inside the house. Second, the security personnel. They never intruded, never stared, but they were always there if you looked carefully enough. 2 or 3 men in dark polo shirts and khaki shorts standing at a respectful distance near pathways, near the marina, near the helipad. Their postures were relaxed, but their eyes missed nothing. They moved with the quiet efficiency of people who had been trained to become part of the scenery until the moment they were needed. She pushed the thoughts away. This was paradise. This was the opportunity she had waited for her entire life. Victor Kane had personally chosen her. The other girls seemed happy, relaxed, already talking about the massage sessions and networking evenings that were apparently the highlight of every stay. The money in the envelope felt real in her pocket. The ocean sounded like freedom. As the first night on Serenity Cay deepened into velvet darkness, she stood on her private deck listening to the waves and told herself that the faint, almost imaginary tension she felt was just jet lag, just the normal nerves that came with stepping into a world so far above her own. Everything was perfect. Everything was exactly as it should be. Nothing could possibly go wrong here. The morning light filtered through the sheer white curtains of her villa like liquid gold, painting soft patterns across the marble floors. She woke slowly, the sound of distant waves mixing with the faint clink of silverware somewhere outside. A gentle knock came at the door exactly at 9. The same housekeeper from the night before entered carrying a silver tray. Fresh tropical fruit arranged like a still life painting, warm croissants, a small pot of coffee that smelled of heaven, and a single white rose in a crystal vase. "Mr. Kane thought you might enjoy breakfast on your private deck," the woman said with a practiced smile that never quite reached her eyes. "He'll join you in 20 minutes if that suits you." She nodded, still half in the dream of the previous night. The money envelope still sat on the nightstand, untouched. $5,000. Real. She showered in the enormous marble bathroom, letting the rainhead shower wash away the last traces of travel fatigue, then chose a simple white sundress from the closet that had mysteriously been stocked with her exact size. Everything here felt curated, personal, thoughtful. Victor Kane was already waiting on the deck when she stepped outside. He wore a pale blue linen shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbows, and looked completely at ease against the backdrop of endless blue sea. "Good morning," he said, standing to pull out her chair. "Sleep well?" The beds here are designed for perfect rest. The conversation flowed lightly at first, about the island's history, how he had spent years perfecting every detail, how he loved giving young women like her a real chance to break through. Most people never get this kind of access, he told her, pouring coffee himself. But you struck me as someone special the moment I saw your photos. Halfway through the fruit plate, he leaned back and stretched his legs. You know, after that long flight, my shoulders are still tight. Would you mind giving me a quick shoulder rub? Nothing formal, just 10 minutes. I'll make it worth your while. The request was so casual, so framed as a favor between friends, that she hesitated only a second before agreeing. His skin was warm under her fingers. He closed his eyes and sighed contentedly. When she finished, he slipped 5 crisp $100 bills into her hand. See? Everyone wins when we help each other. He winked. She laughed, a little nervously, pocketing the money. Felt good. Generous. Normal. The rest of the morning passed in a pleasant blur. She swam in the infinity pool that seemed to float above the ocean, read a book from the villa's curated library, and met a few of the other young women at the beach cabana. They were all beautiful, all smiling, all dressed in similar flowing dresses or bikinis that somehow looked expensive even when simple. One of them, a tall blonde who introduced herself only as Lila, offered sunscreen and whispered, "The massages here are the best part. Victor pays really well if you're good at them." Another girl, dark-haired and quiet, just nodded without saying much. Their eyes had a certain glossiness, as if they had learned to keep certain thoughts behind a permanent smile. Lunch was served poolside, grilled seafood, chilled white wine, salads so fresh they tasted like they had been picked minutes earlier. Victor sat at the head again, joined this time by 3 other guests. Marcus Reed, a tech investor whose name she vaguely recognized from business magazines. Lord Blake, a British man with a clipped accent and expensive watch. And Dr. Elias Thorne, a scientist who spoke softly about renewable energy. The men were charming, attentive, asking her questions about her dreams, her hometown, her plans. Every time she answered, they listened as if her words were precious. It felt intoxicating, but small things kept happening. After lunch, Marcus Reed asked her to walk with him along the coral path to the tennis court. "I need someone to help me choose the right racket grip," he said with a laugh. Halfway there, he stopped, took off his shoes, and asked her to rub his feet because the sand gets everywhere and my arches are killing me. Again, the request was wrapped in gratitude and another folded bill, $200 this time. She did it. The path was shaded, no one else around. His tone stayed light, but his hand lingered on her shoulder a moment longer than necessary when he thanked her. By afternoon, the heat had risen. She returned to her villa to rest. The housekeeper appeared again, this time with a new envelope and a note in elegant handwriting. "For your excellent service this morning." Veka. Inside were another $1,000. She stared at the cash, heart beating faster. This was more money than she had ever seen in one place. But something in the way the housekeeper avoided eye contact made the back of her neck prickle. Evening arrived wrapped in golden light. Dinner was on the main terrace again, candles flickering, jazz trio playing the same soft melodies. Victor announced that tonight was relaxation night and suggested everyone pair up for private conversations. She found herself seated next to Lord Blake. He was polite, asked about her family, then casually mentioned how important it was to be flexible if you wanted to succeed in his world. "Some girls are too rigid," he said, sipping his wine. "They miss the opportunities right in front of them." When she asked what he meant, he only smiled and changed the subject. After dinner, the group moved to the beach lounge. Someone brought out a bottle of vintage champagne. Victor suggested she give Dr. Elias Thorne a neck massage because he's been working too hard on his latest project. The request came with another payment, $300. She complied, kneeling behind the scientist on a cushioned chair while the others chatted and laughed nearby. The conversation around her grew louder, the laughter sharper. One of the girls, Lila, was sitting very close to Marcus Reed, her hand on his knee. No one seemed to find it unusual. Later, around midnight, Lord Blake asked her for a walk along the moonlit beach. "Just to clear my head," he said. The sand was cool now. The waves whispered secrets. He talked about his estate in England, his connections in Parliament, how he could open doors for someone like her. Then he stopped, turned to her, and said softly, "You're very beautiful when you smile. You should smile more often here. It makes everything easier." His hand brushed her arm. She stepped back slightly. He noticed. His tone stayed pleasant, but the smile cooled by half a degree. "Don't worry, darling. We're all friends here. No pressure. Just friendliness." She returned to her villa alone, heart thumping. The cash in her drawer now totaled over $2,000 in less than 24 hours. She tried to sleep but kept replaying the moments. The foot rub, the neck massage, the lingering touches, the subtle comments about smiling more, being flexible, not being rigid. The next day the pattern continued, only slightly more insistent. Breakfast again with Victor. This time he asked her to help choose outfits for the evening. "You have such good taste." Then he requested she organize the massage oils in the spa room because the staff sometimes mixed them up. While she was there, Lila appeared, looking tired. "You get used to it," Lila whispered when no one was around. "The money is real. Just keep them happy and the opportunities keep coming." When she asked Lila if she could leave early, the other girl's eyes flicked toward the hidden security camera in the corner. "Better not ask that out loud," she murmured. "They don't like it when girls seem ungrateful." Afternoon brought another favor. Marcus Reed wanted her to join him on the yacht for a short sail. Just an hour to see the island from the water. On board, he asked her to apply sunscreen to his back. The bill he handed her afterward was $500. "For your time and your lovely company." His fingers grazed hers when she took the money. She smiled because she didn't know what else to do. That evening Victor gathered everyone in the main living room for story time. Each guest was encouraged to share something personal. When it was her turn, she spoke about her small town, her hopes. The men nodded encouragingly. Afterward, Victor pulled her aside. "Beautiful story," he said, "but next time add a little more sparkle. These men are here to relax. They like girls who lift the mood." He placed another envelope in her hand. $700. "For practicing your sparkle." By the third day, the small requests had multiplied. Foot rubs after tennis. Shoulder massages after swimming. Helping serve drinks at sunset while wearing a particular dress someone had laid out for her. Always money followed. Always praise. Always the quiet reminder that flexibility and friendliness were the keys to staying in paradise. She began noticing the other girls more clearly. Some had the same empty, polished smiles. One, a redhead called Sage, disappeared into a private villa with Dr. Thorne for 3 hours and came back with swollen eyes but a new diamond tennis bracelet on her wrist. When she tried to ask Sage how she was, the girl only shook her head and said, "Just keep smiling. They hate when you don't." Phones were still locked away. Internet was unreliable on the island, they said. The security men in dark polos remained polite but ever-present. When she casually mentioned to a housekeeper that she might want to leave a day early, the woman's smile froze for half a second. "Mr. Kane would be so disappointed. He's already planning special activities for you tomorrow." The fourth day brought the first real crack she couldn't ignore. Victor asked her to invite a couple of your friends to join them. "The more the merrier," he said over lunch. "I'll send the jet. They'll love it here. And you'll earn a bonus for each one who comes." He named a figure that made her breath catch, $10,000 per friend. She hesitated. I don't know if they can drop everything." His smile stayed warm but his eyes sharpened. "Think about it. Opportunities like this don't come twice. Some girls here made the mistake of being too hesitant. They're back home now, working minimum wage again." The words were gentle, but the meaning was steel underneath. That night at dinner, Lord Blake sat next to her again. His hand found her knee under the table once. She moved it away. He laughed softly. "Relax, darling. You're among friends. Being too uptight is the fastest way to lose everything good here." Marcus Reed joined in, telling a story about a girl who had ruined her own chances by saying no too often. Everyone laughed. She laughed too, because the alternative felt suddenly dangerous. Later, alone on her deck, she counted the cash she had accumulated in 4 days. Almost $9,000. Enough to change her life. Enough to pay debts, help her family, start over. But the words kept echoing, flexible, smile more, don't be rigid, we know where your family lives. Wait, had someone actually said that, or had she imagined it? The memory blurred. The ocean looked darker now. The palm trees cast longer shadows. The security men seemed closer. She tried to call out from the villa phone. There was one, but it only connected to the main house. When she asked the operator for an outside line, the voice on the other end was pleasant but firm. I'm sorry. Mr. Kane prefers all communication go through him for privacy reasons. Is there a message I can pass? That night she lay awake listening to the waves and felt the first real weight settle in her chest. The paradise was still beautiful. The money was still real. The smiles were still there. But something had shifted. The cracks were tiny, almost invisible. Yet they were spreading, each small request, each extra bill, each cooled smile when she hesitated, each whispered warning from the other girls. She was no longer just a guest. She was becoming part of the machinery that kept this island running smoothly for the powerful men who came here to forget the word no. And for the first time since landing, she wondered how long it would take before the cracks became too wide to step over. The next morning the pattern repeated, only the requests felt a fraction heavier, the smiles a fraction tighter, the money a fraction more necessary to silence the growing whisper in her mind that something was fundamentally wrong in this perfect place. The tension was still small, manageable, but it was there now like a hairline fracture in flawless glass, invisible until the light hit it just right, and then impossible to unsee. The knock at 9 o'clock was the same gentle rhythm. The same silver tray appeared with the same perfect arrangement of mango slices glistening with dew, papaya cut into precise stars, warm almond croissants dusted with powdered sugar that melted on the tongue, and the single white rose now replaced by a pale pink one whose petals trembled slightly in the sea breeze. The housekeeper's smile was identical to yesterday's, yet today it seemed to sit a millimeter too high on her face, as if held in place by invisible strings. Mr. Kane requests your company for breakfast on the East Terrace today, she said softly. He mentioned something about needing help with the morning playlist selection. He values your taste in music. She dressed in another outfit that had appeared overnight in the closet. A pale linen blouse and wide-leg trousers in the exact shade of seafoam that complemented the island's palette. The fabric felt expensive against her skin, cool and whispering. When she arrived at the East Terrace, Victor Kane was already there, standing at the railing overlooking a small private cove where turquoise water lapped at black volcanic rocks. He turned with that same warm, fatherly smile. Ah, there you are. Come sit. The light is perfect this morning. He poured her coffee himself, adding exactly the amount of cream she had mentioned the day before. The conversation began innocently enough. The weather, the way the sunrise painted the clouds pink and gold, how the island never failed to reset a person's soul. Then, midway through the second croissant, he stretched his neck from side to side with an exaggerated wince. These flights do a number on my posture. Would you mind terribly? Just the upper back and shoulders again. 10 minutes, no more. I promise I'll return the favor later with a surprise I think you'll love. The request landed with the same casual lightness as before, yet something in the way his eyes held hers a beat longer made the air feel thicker. She nodded, stood behind his chair, and placed her hands on the firm muscles beneath the linen shirt. His skin was warm, almost feverish from the sun. He let out a low, satisfied groan that seemed to echo across the terrace. When she finished, he turned, pressed a thick envelope into her palm, $800 this time, and said, "You're becoming indispensable. I like that in a guest." The rest of the morning unfolded in the same gilded rhythm. She joined Lila and Sage at the infinity pool, where the water was kept at the precise temperature of skin so it felt like floating in nothing at all. Lila was applying oil to her long legs, the scent of coconut and vanilla drifting on the breeze. "Did Victor ask you for the shoulder thing yet?" she asked without looking up. Sage, lying on her stomach with her face turned away, gave the smallest nod. "Every morning now," she murmured into the cushion. "Sometimes twice." When she asked if they ever said no, both girls laughed, but the sound was thin, like glass about to crack. Lila lowered her voice. "Saying no is like stepping off the path. The security guys suddenly appear to escort you back to your villa. Then the invitations stop. The money dries up. And suddenly you're on the next plane home with nothing but memories and a warning not to talk." Sage added, almost too quietly to hear, "They know things about your family, your old job, your ex. It's easier to just stay flexible." Lunch was served at a long table shaded by a white canopy that fluttered like sails. Marcus Reed arrived late, smelling of expensive cologne and salt from an early swim. He chose the seat directly beside her. "You look radiant today," he said, his knee brushing hers under the tablecloth. The contact was brief, accidental on the surface, but he didn't move away. Lord Blake joined them, his British accent crisp as ever, and immediately launched into a story about a difficult young lady he had once known who couldn't adapt to the pace of high society. Every few sentences he glanced at her with a meaningful smile. Dr. Elias Thorne spoke little, but when he did it was to compliment her healing hands from the previous night's massage and to ask if she would mind demonstrating a particular pressure point on his temples after dessert. The small favors multiplied like ripples. Marcus needed help choosing the right wine for the evening. "Your palate is so fresh and unspoiled." Lord Blake requested she hold his phone while he took a call because the signal is better when the device is elevated, and then asked her to massage his temples while he spoke. Dr. Thorne wanted her to walk with him to the meditation pavilion because your energy is calming. Each request came wrapped in compliments. Each ended with cash slipped discreetly into her hand. 500 here, 600 there. Another 1,000 when she agreed to rearrange the massage oils in the spa again because the labels are confusing for the new staff. By mid-afternoon, the sun had climbed high and the heat pressed down like a warm hand. She retreated to her villa, intending to read, but the housekeeper appeared with yet another envelope and a handwritten note. "For your continued grace under the Caribbean sun. Looking forward to tonight's special gathering. Veka." Inside were $1,200 and a new dress laid out on the bed. Silk the color of moonlight, cut low in the back. A small card rested on the fabric. "Wear this for dinner. It will look exquisite on you." The dress fit perfectly, of course. Everything here fit perfectly. Evening arrived wrapped in the same golden haze. The main terrace was transformed. More candles, fresh flower arrangements that scented the air with jasmine and plumeria. A new string quartet playing soft classical pieces instead of jazz. 2 additional guests had arrived by helicopter during the afternoon. A silver-haired hedge fund manager named Harlan Voss and a fashion executive called Nadia Vale who spoke in rapid French-accented English. Victor introduced her to them as our newest shining star. The conversation swirled around her like warm water. Everyone wanted to know her story, her ambitions, her favorite books. Their attention felt like sunlight, intoxicating. Then the requests shifted again, each one sliding a little deeper under her skin. Harlan Voss asked her to dance after the first course, a slow, swaying waltz on the open section of the terrace. His hand rested low on her back, fingers pressing just enough to guide her movements. "You move beautifully," he whispered near her ear, "like you were born for this life." When the song ended, he pressed 3 crisp $1,000 bills into her palm and said, "For the privilege of the dance." Nadia Vale pulled her aside later, complimenting the dress and then asking if she would mind helping adjust the straps on her own gown because the staff never get it quite right. The adjustment required standing very close, fingers brushing bare skin. Nadia's smile never wavered, but her eyes held a warning. "Be smart here, Sherry. The men notice when you hesitate, and they remember." After dinner, the group migrated to the beach lounge area where low daybeds were arranged in a semicircle around a fire pit. Victor suggested group relaxation time. She found herself seated between Marcus Reed and Lord Blake. The conversation turned personal again. Marcus told a long story about a previous visitor who had been too shy and had therefore missed the chance of a lifetime. Lord Blake added details, his hand resting casually on the cushion inches from her thigh. When she shifted away, he simply smiled and continued speaking as if nothing had happened. Dr. Thorne asked her to demonstrate a breathing exercise on him. "Place your hand here on my chest so I can feel the rhythm." His skin was warm beneath the thin shirt. The others watched with polite, approving nods. Midnight came and went. The fire crackled softly. One by one, the men began to retire, each stopping to thank her personally, each leaving another envelope. By the time she finally walked back to her villa along the coral path lit by soft ground lights, the total cash accumulated over the past 5 days sat heavy in the drawer, nearly $23,000. Enough to pay off every debt her family had ever carried. Enough to buy an apartment in a decent city. Enough to never worry about rent again. Yet sleep would not come. She lay on the perfect bed, Egyptian cotton cool against her skin, and stared at the ceiling fan turning lazy circles. Every small touch replayed in her mind. The lingering hands, the lowered voices, the way smiles tightened when she hesitated even a fraction of a second. She remembered Lila's whispered warning, Sage's swollen eyes, the way the housekeeper's gaze slid away whenever money changed hands. The security men patrolling the paths outside her villa cast long shadows that moved across the sheer curtains like silent warnings. The ocean, which had sounded like freedom on the first night, now seemed to whisper a different message. You are far from shore, and the tide is pulling. Morning of day 6 arrived with the same ritual, but the envelope on the breakfast tray contained a new note. Today we sail. Wear the white bikini and cover-up I left for you. The yacht awaits your company. Veka. The yacht was even more luxurious than it had appeared from shore. Teak decks gleaming, a shaded salon with plush sofas, a small jacuzzi on the upper deck, and a crew of 4 who moved like ghosts, anticipating every need. Victor steered the vessel himself for the first hour, showing her how to read the instruments, letting her take the wheel for a few minutes while the wind whipped her hair. Marcus Reed and Harlan Voss joined them, bringing chilled bottles of champagne. The conversation stayed light until they anchored in a secluded cove on the far side of the island, a place where the water was so clear she could see fish darting over white sand 30 feet below. That was when the requests became more enclosed, more private. Marcus asked her to apply sunscreen to his back and shoulders because the reflection off the water burns fast. He lay face down on a padded lounge chair. His skin was hot from the sun. When she finished, he rolled over and asked her to do his chest as well, his eyes never leaving hers. The bill he handed her was $2,000. Harlan Voss wanted her to join him in the jacuzzi to demonstrate the proper way to relax the neck muscles. The water bubbled warmly around them. Lord Blake, who had arrived by tender a few minutes later, sat on the edge and watched, commenting on how graceful her movements were. Each man took turns asking for small services. A foot rub while they sipped drinks, a shoulder massage while they discussed business, a walk along the narrow deck where the railing forced them close together. The sun climbed higher, the champagne flowed, the laughter grew louder, but beneath it she felt the pressure building like a storm just beyond the horizon. When she tried to excuse herself to the lower deck for a moment alone, Victor appeared at the top of the stairs. "Everything all right?" he asked, voice smooth as ever. "You seem a little quiet today. The men adore you, you know. They've all said how refreshing your presence is. Don't disappoint them or me." The words were kind, the smile genuine, yet the implication settled like a stone in her stomach. By the time the yacht returned to the marina at sunset, she had earned another $9,000. Her skin smelled of sunscreen and salt and expensive cologne that wasn't hers. In the villa, she stood under the rain shower for a long time, trying to wash away the feeling of hands that had never quite crossed a line but had danced right up to its edge again and again. Day 7 brought rain, a soft, warm Caribbean shower that turned the island into a watercolor painting. The group gathered indoors in the grand living room where floor-to-ceiling windows framed the gray sea. Victor announced a story circle, where each guest would share something intimate. When her turn came, she spoke carefully about her childhood, her dreams of a better life, keeping the details vague. The men listened intently, nodding, murmuring encouragement. Afterward, Victor pulled her into a side alcove. "Beautiful," he said. "But next time let them see a little more vulnerability. These gentlemen respond to openness. It makes them feel needed." He pressed a new envelope into her hand, $1,500, and added, "I've arranged for 2 of your friends to fly in tomorrow if you give me their numbers. Think of the bonus. 20,000 per girl. They'll thank you forever." She hesitated. The numbers spun in her head. Victor's smile remained warm, but his eyes had that sharpened look again. "Don't be the girl who leaves opportunities on the table," he said softly. "I've seen it happen. They go home with nothing but regret and a story no one believes." That night, the rain tapped against the windows like impatient fingers. She counted the cash again. Over $40,000 in a week. Her hands shook as she stacked the bills. Outside, the security lights swept the paths in slow, regular arcs. One of the men in dark polos paused directly beneath her deck, looked up, and nodded once before continuing his round. The gesture was polite, professional, and utterly chilling. Day 8, Day 9, Day 10 blurred into a continuous loop of small surrenders. Morning massages for Victor that lasted longer each time. Afternoon networking sessions on the yacht where she was asked to sit between 2 guests and keep the energy light. Evening dinners where hands brushed her waist when she passed drinks, where compliments about her adaptability grew more frequent, where the other girl's eyes warned her silently across the table. Lila disappeared for an entire afternoon with Harlan Voss and returned wearing a new gold necklace and a vacant smile. Sage was asked to stay overnight in the main villa to help with a special project, and came back at dawn with red-rimmed eyes but another thick envelope. Each day the requests gained weight. A foot massage while a guest took a business call. Holding a man's hand during a sunset walk because the path is uneven. Changing into a different outfit mid-evening because this color brings out your eyes better for the photographs we'll take later. All private, of course. Always the money followed, always the praise, always the subtle reminder that hesitation was noticed, recorded, remembered. Her internal monologue became a constant companion, repeating the same questions in an endless loop while she smiled and nodded and rubbed shoulders and laughed at jokes that weren't funny. How much longer can I keep saying yes before yes stops being a choice? How deep do the cracks go before the whole island shatters? The turquoise water still sparkled, the palm trees still swayed, the food still tasted like heaven, but every perfect detail now carried the faint metallic aftertaste of a cage wrapped in silk. By day 12, the pattern had become almost ritualistic. She could predict the sequence. Breakfast favor, poolside request, yacht excursion with escalating intimacy, evening gathering where new boundaries were tested with velvet gloves. The total cash in the drawer had passed $70,000. Enough to change 3 lives. Enough to buy silence for years. Yet every night when she locked the door and turned off the lights, the same sentence echoed in the darkness. This is not generosity. This is payment. And payments always come with expectations. The security men had begun to greet her by name now, their voices polite, their eyes watchful. The housekeeper no longer met her gaze when delivering new outfits or fresh envelopes. The other girls moved through the days like beautiful ghosts, their laughter bright but their silences heavy. And Victor Kane continued to smile that same welcoming smile, the smile of a man who had built an entire paradise on the simple principle that every girl eventually learned the true cost of staying in heaven. The hairline fracture had widened. It was still not yet a break. But she could feel the glass trembling under her feet with every new request, every new bill, every new night that ended with her counting money instead of counting blessings. And still the ocean whispered its endless, unchanging song, as if nothing at all had changed. The 13th day dawned with a deceptive calm. The sky was a flawless dome of blue, the air thick with the perfume of night-blooming jasmine that had opened while everyone slept. Breakfast arrived at the usual hour, but the silver tray carried something new. A single sheet of thick cream stationery folded once, resting beside the coffee pot like an invitation. She opened it before the housekeeper left the room. "My dear guest," Victor's elegant script read, "tonight we host a very special private gathering in the main residence. Your presence is not merely requested, it is expected. Dress code: the black silk gown from the wardrobe. Arrive at 9 p.m. sharp. No exceptions. Veka. No smiley face. No quorum postscript. Just the crisp finality of the last sentence. She spent the day in a strange suspension. The usual small favors continued. A shoulder rub for Victor mid-morning, sunscreen application for Marcus on the upper deck of the yacht at noon, a foot massage for Lord Blake while he reviewed documents on a shaded lounger. But the rhythm felt different now. The compliments were shorter, the envelopes thicker, but handed over with less ceremony. No one asked anymore. They assumed. When she hesitated for half a second before kneeling to rub Dr. Thorne's calves after his swim, his eyes narrowed and he simply said, "Don't make me repeat myself." The words were quiet. The threat was not. By late afternoon, the other girls had withdrawn to their villas to prepare. Lila passed her in the corridor leading to the spa, already in a sheer robe, makeup flawless but eyes red-rimmed. "Tonight's different," she whispered without stopping. "They bring out the cameras. Hidden ones are always there, but tonight they want visible angles. Just do what they say. Fighting makes it worse." Sage didn't speak at all when their paths crossed near the infinity pool. She only looked at her once, long and hard, then turned away as if the sight hurt. At 8:30, the black silk gown waited on the bed like a shadow given form. It was floor-length, bias-cut, clinging in places that made movement feel exposed. The neckline plunged low enough that breathing felt deliberate. No underwear had been provided, only a pair of strappy heels and a thin gold chain necklace with a small pendant shaped like a key. She dressed slowly, stomach knotted, telling herself it was just another dinner, just another evening of practiced smiles and careful distance. The main residence glowed from within when she arrived. Floor-to-ceiling glass walls had been opened to the night, letting the warm breeze carry the scent of cigar smoke and expensive aftershave. Soft amber lighting spilled across white marble floors. A string quartet played in the corner, slower, more sensual pieces than before. Perhaps 20 people were present. The familiar faces, Victor, Marcus, Lord Blake, Harlan Voss, Dr. Thorne, Nadia Vale, plus 5 new men she had never seen. Older, quieter, dressed in bespoke suits that screamed discreet power. 2 additional women, strangers to her, moved among them like ornaments. One in red lace, the other in emerald satin, both smiling the same fixed, glassy smile she had begun to recognize on every girl's face. Victor met her at the entrance. His hand settled on the small of her back. Not a guiding touch anymore, but a possessive one. "You look perfect," he murmured. "Remember, tonight we reward loyalty, and we notice ingratitude." He steered her toward the center of the room where a long ebony table had been set for a late supper. No place cards. Guests chose seats. She was directed to sit between Harlan Voss and one of the newcomers, a man introduced only as the Senator, silver-haired, soft-spoken, eyes like polished obsidian. Dinner began normally enough. Chilled caviar, foie gras torchon, truffle risotto, wines poured from bottles without labels. Conversation stayed surface level at first, markets, policy, art acquisitions. But as the courses progressed, the tone shifted. Harlan's hand found her thigh under the tablecloth during the main course. She froze. He didn't move it away. Instead, he leaned close and whispered, "Relax. Everyone here is discreet." When she tried to shift her leg, his fingers tightened. Not painfully, but enough to make escape impossible without a scene. Across the table, Marcus watched with mild amusement. Lord Blake raised his glass in a silent toast. After dessert, the quartet stopped. Victor stood. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, voice carrying effortlessly. "Tonight we move to the screening room for a little entertainment. Our guests of honor will demonstrate their talents." Polite laughter rippled through the room. The senator's hand joined Harlan's under the table. One on each knee now. She felt the blood drain from her face. The screening room was downstairs, carved into the hillside, windowless, soundproofed. Plush velvet sofas arranged in a semicircle facing a blank wall that served as a screen. Dim red lighting. A bar in the corner stocked with crystal decanters. As people filed in, Victor gently but firmly guided her to a central sofa. the one directly in front of where a projector would shine. Two of the new men sat on either side of her. The other girls were distributed among the guests, some already perched on laps, others kneeling at feet like obedient pets. The entertainment began with a grainy, amateur-looking footage shot on the island itself. Girls she recognized from previous weeks, some who had left days earlier, performing massages that were anything but therapeutic. Hands moved where they shouldn't. Mouths followed. Faces were blurred, but voices were clear, breathy moans, murmured instructions, occasional laughter from off-camera. The room filled with the low sound of approval from the men. Some shifted closer. Hands wandered more freely. Halfway through the film, Victor dimmed the lights further and spoke softly. "Now, my dears, it's time to participate. Show our guests why Serenity K is unforgettable." The senator turned to her first. "On your knees," he said, not a request. When she didn't move immediately, Harlan's hand closed around her wrist, hard enough to bruise. "Don't make this difficult," he murmured. "You've been paid very well. Time to earn it properly." She looked around the room in panic. Lila was already on her knees in front of Marcus, head bowed. Sage knelt between two strangers, tears streaking mascara but silent. Nadia Vale sat on Lord Blake's lap, laughing artificially at something he whispered. The other two new girls had disappeared into darker corners with the remaining men. Victor stood at the back, arms folded, watching like a director overseeing a scene. When her eyes met his, he gave the smallest nod, encouragement wrapped in warning. The senator's hand moved to the zipper at the back of her gown. Fabric parted. Cool air hit skin. She tried to stand. Two pairs of hands, Harlan's and the senator's, pressed her shoulders down. "Stay," the senator said quietly, "or the tapes go public. Your family sees them first. Your friends. Your future employers. We have your phone. We have your contacts. Think carefully." The threat landed like ice water. She sank to her knees. What followed was a slow, methodical dismantling of every boundary she had left. Hands on her body, too many, too sure. Mouths demanding. Instructions given in calm, reasonable tones as if this were the most natural progression in the world. When she gagged, someone laughed softly and said, "Breathe through your nose, darling." When she tried to pull away, fingers tangled in her hair and held her in place. The room smelled of expensive cologne, sweat, arousal, cigar smoke. The projector kept running in the background, looped footage of other girls in the same positions, same expressions of resignation. Time lost meaning. Minutes stretched into hours or collapsed into seconds. She couldn't tell. At one point Victor approached, crouched beside her, lifted her chin with one finger. "You're doing beautifully," he whispered. "Just a little longer and the bonuses double. You'll leave here a rich woman." Then he stood and returned to his observation post. Eventually the men tired. Some drifted to the bar. Others took girls to side rooms. She was left on the floor, gown torn at the shoulder, makeup smeared, body aching in places she hadn't known could hurt that way. One of the security men, the same one who had nodded under her deck nights earlier, appeared silently, draped a robe over her shoulders and helped her stand. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. His grip on her arm was firm, guiding, inescapable. They walked her back to her villa along the coral path. The night air was cool now.
Criquessant.
The ocean whispered the same indifferent song. At her door the guard paused. "Mr. Kane expects you at breakfast tomorrow. 8 sharp. Don't be late." She locked the door behind her, slid down against it, and cried without sound until dawn. The 14th day brought no breakfast tray. Instead, a note under the door: "You will join Mr. Kane in the main residence at 8 a.m., where what you find on the bed. Do not be late." On the bed lay a simple white sundress, innocent, almost virginal. Beside it, another envelope. Inside, $50,000 in cash and a single line: "For services rendered. More to come if you continue to please." She dressed, went, sat at the breakfast table where Victor waited alone. He poured her coffee as if nothing had changed. "Last night was a success," he said mildly. "Our guests were delighted. You'll find your account credited with an additional 100,000 by noon. And there's more where that came from, if you stay cooperative." She stared at the coffee. Steam rose in lazy spirals. "I want to leave," she said, voice small, barely there. Victor's smile was gentle, almost kind. "Of course you can leave. The jet is fueled. But consider the consequences. The footage, the names we have, the promises you've already made with your body and your silence. You walk away now, and everything you've earned disappears. Your family receives interesting packages. Your social media, should it ever reactivate, fills with things you never posted. You'll spend years explaining, denying, hiding. Or," he leaned forward, "you stay a little longer, a few more weeks, a few more gatherings. Then you leave wealthy, discreet, free. No one ever knows. Your choice." He placed another envelope beside her plate. This one contained a single photograph, her on her knees in the screening room, face half turned toward the camera. Blurry enough to be deniable in court, clear enough to destroy a life. She looked at the photo for a long time. Then she folded it carefully, placed it back in the envelope, and stood. "I need time to think," she said. Victor nodded. "Take all morning, but be back for lunch. The senator requested your company again. He pays exceptionally well for repeat performances." She walked out, back to her villa, locked the door, sat on the edge of the bed staring at the ocean. The paradise had peeled away its final mask. What remained was raw power, transactional sex, blackmail, isolation. No more small humiliations, only large ones, only surrender or destruction. She had crossed the line from guest to commodity, and the island, beautiful, indifferent, inescapable, closed around her like a fist. The 15th morning arrived under a heavy, oppressive sky that had been gathering force for days, with low gray clouds pressing down on Serenity Cay like the lid of a slowly boiling pot, while rain hammered relentlessly against the palm fronds and transformed the pristine white sand paths into shallow, muddy rivers that snaked between the villas. Lightning flickered silently along the distant horizon, and thunder rolled in long, lazy growls that seemed to echo the island's growing sense of confinement, making the once expansive paradise feel suddenly smaller, more claustrophobic, and infinitely more isolated from the rest of the world. Instead of going to breakfast as expected, she remained in her villa, sitting cross-legged on the cool marble floor surrounded by every envelope she had ever received, the stacks of cash, now amounting to hundreds of thousands of dollars, arranged in neat, almost military columns around her like silent witnesses to the transaction that had defined the past 2 weeks, while the single damning photograph from the screening room lay exactly in the center, staring up at her with merciless clarity. She looked at it for what felt like hours, allowing the image to burn itself deeper into her mind until the edges blurred and the reality of what it represented became impossible to ignore any longer. Then, with deliberate calm, she began to act. Reaching for the black silk gown she had worn 2 nights earlier, she carefully tore open the lining along the hem where she had noticed something unusual days before during one of the seemingly innocuous, organizing the massage oils tasks in the spa room. Hidden there, stitched so subtly that it appeared to be nothing more than decorative threading, was a tiny voice recorder she had quietly pocketed when no one was watching, its small black body still intact and, most importantly, still holding whatever had been captured in the days since she took it. With trembling fingers she pressed the play button, and Victor's voice immediately filled the quiet room, tinny through the miniature speaker yet unmistakable in its cold precision as he discussed keeping the new one compliant, mentioned doubling bonuses for performances without tears, and casually ordered that cameras capture every angle because our friends in DC pay premium for the private cuts. A woman's laugh followed, Nadia Vale's distinctive French-accented chuckle, before more voices joined in, naming dates, specifying techniques for breaking resistance, debating which girls fractured fastest under family threats and which required a slower application of financial pressure until surrender became inevitable. She listened to the entire recording twice, then a third time, each repetition carving the words more deeply into her consciousness until they no longer felt like threats but like evidence. Tangible, irrefutable proof that could not be explained away as misunderstanding or exaggeration. When the battery finally died, she sat motionless in the dim light for a long while, listening instead to the rain drumming steadily on the roof as though the sky itself were applauding the decision that was crystallizing inside her. She possessed no phone, no internet access, and no legitimate way off the island without their explicit permission. Yet what she did have was something they had never anticipated. An accumulated store of patience born from weeks of forced compliance, a detailed mental map of routines and vulnerabilities, and the quiet realization that people who believe absolute control has already been achieved tend to grow careless exactly when the script appears to be following their expectations perfectly. Over the preceding days, she had unconsciously cataloged every small detail that might one day matter. The precise times when security shifts changed at 4 in the morning and 4 in the afternoon when the men were visibly fatigued and less observant. The fact that the housekeeper always hung the master keyring on the same hook in the utility closet behind the main kitchen during her 2 o'clock laundry collection. The Tuesday afternoon ritual when the yacht's tender boat was refueled and the keys left unattended on a peg inside the marina office for exactly 11 minutes while the mechanic inspected the engines below deck, and the locations of the 27 hidden cameras she had painstakingly counted, each with its own tiny blind spot. The narrow, overgrown path directly behind the meditation pavilion, the cramped storage area beneath the helipad stairs, and the far eastern end of the beach where jagged black rocks blocked every line of sight from the main compound. More importantly, she had begun to understand the psychological weaknesses that underpinned their entire system of control. Victor's unshakable confidence that no one would ever dare challenge him openly because no one ever had, the guests' reliance on scripted compliance rather than genuine resistance which left them vulnerable once that script was disrupted, and the other girl's paralyzing combination of fear and financial dependence that prevented any coordinated action. But she had reached the point where money no longer held power over her. What mattered now was survival, dignity, and the faces of her family back home who deserved better than to live in ignorance of what their daughter had endured. So she began, methodically and without haste, to execute the plan that had formed in fragments during sleepless nights. At 1:45 in the afternoon, while the rain continued to fall in heavy sheets that muffled sound and reduced visibility, she left her villa dressed in the simple white sundress from that morning. No makeup, no jewelry, hair pulled back plainly in a way that made her look deliberately defeated and therefore harmless in their eyes. She walked slowly toward the main residence with her head bowed and shoulders hunched against the weather, passing the security guard at the entrance who gave her only a cursory nod before returning to his shelter. Entering through the rarely monitored staff door used by the housekeepers, she found the utility closet empty as expected, took only the 2 keys she needed, the one for the marina office and the one for the utility shed near the helipad, then replaced the keyring exactly as it had hung and slipped back out into the downpour without anyone noticing her brief absence. By 2:03 she was inside the marina office. The mechanic was underneath the tender boat cursing at a stubborn fitting, giving her the 11-minute window she had anticipated. She took the keys from their peg, tucked them into the hidden pocket of her dress, and walked out again as though she had merely come to ask a trivial question about tomorrow's schedule. Next, she made her way to the meditation pavilion, using the blind spot behind it to meet Lila, whom she had signaled the previous night by leaving a single white flower on the bench, a prearranged code they had developed in whispered fragments during poolside conversations. Lila arrived soaked and terrified, eyes wide with the fear of what she was risking, but she listened as the plan was explained in hurried whispers. Escape tonight. Meet at the Eastern Beach Rocks at 3:45 a.m. Bring sage. Tell absolutely no one else. When Lila whispered that they would be killed if caught, the response came without hesitation. They're already killing us, one piece of ourselves at a time. This is the only way it stops. Lila swallowed hard, nodded once, and vanished back into the rain. By 3 o'clock she had returned to her villa, outwardly calm and resigned, packing nothing that could arouse suspicion. Instead, she carefully sewed the voice recorder into the hem of the white sundress she still wore, along with a small waterproof pouch containing the 2 stolen keys and the incriminating photograph, creating a hidden bundle that rested against her skin like a promise of retribution. Dinner was announced for 8 o'clock in the main residence. Another gathering, another performance demanded. She attended, but this time she smiled more easily, laughed at their crude jokes with practiced lightness, allowed Harlan's hand to rest on her thigh without visible flinching, and poured wine for the senator with hands that no longer shook. She played the part of the girl who had finally accepted her place in their world so convincingly that even Victor noticed, As he passed her chair, he leaned down and murmured with genuine satisfaction, "You've come around at last. Smart choice." She lifted her eyes to meet his and returned the sweetest, most submissive smile she could muster. "I just want to make everyone happy," she said softly, the words tasting like ash but serving their purpose perfectly. Inside her, however, something cold, hard, and unbreakable had taken firm root. At midnight, the men were deep in their drinks, their movements slower and their attention dulled by alcohol and the comfortable certainty that the evening would end exactly as they expected. She participated just enough to avoid raising alarm, enough to keep their hands occupied and their minds fogged. Then at 2:50 a.m., when the rain had eased to a light persistent drizzle, she excused herself to the powder room, slipped quietly through the side door, and melted into the darkness. The eastern beach rocks were treacherous underfoot, slick with seawater and moss, but Lila and Sage were already waiting there, shivering violently in the moonlight, their eyes huge with a mixture of terror and desperate hope. No words passed between them. They simply followed as she led the way along the memorized path to the helipad storage shed, where the second stolen key turned smoothly in the lock. Inside she found what she had hoped for: emergency flares, life vests, a compact outboard motor stored for repairs, and, crucially, the backup radio transmitter used by staff for weather reports, locked in a metal box that opened with the remaining key. She powered it on. The battery showed 87%. Tuning to the international distress frequency, she spoke clearly and without hesitation. "Mayday, mayday, mayday. This is an unnamed vessel at approximate coordinates 18 degrees 15 minutes north, 64 degrees 50 minutes west. Multiple women are being held against their will on the private island known as Serenity Cay. Physical coercion, blackmail with recorded evidence in our possession. We request immediate law enforcement and Coast Guard intervention. The primary perpetrator is Victor Kane. Repeat, Victor Kane. We are 3 women attempting to escape. Armed security is present on the island. Please send help immediately." She transmitted the message 3 times, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands, then deliberately smashed the radio against the concrete floor to prevent quick tracing. They ran. The tender boat was small, barely sufficient for 3, but the outboard motor caught on the first pull, and Sage took the helm with the instinctive confidence of someone who had grown up around water. Lila kept watch toward the receding shoreline, while she clutched the waterproof pouch containing the recorder and photograph against her chest like a shield. They motored steadily west into the darkness, waves slapping against the hull, cold rain stinging their faces, the black silhouette of the island shrinking behind them until only the faint glow of villa lights remained visible. At 4:17 a.m., the first powerful searchlight cut across the water from a distant Coast Guard cutter, followed quickly by another, and then by the unmistakable thump of helicopter rotors overhead. They cut the engine, raised their hands high, and waited in silence as the boarding team approached. Flashlights sweeping, voices shouting commands, life jackets thrown across the gap. When the officers reached them, she handed over the pouch without a word. "Everything is in there," she said quietly. "The recording, the photograph, names, dates, it's all there." The lead officer looked at her, rain-soaked, bruised, utterly exhausted, and something in his expression softened with respect. "You're safe now," he told her simply. She did not allow herself to cry until they had wrapped her in a coarse wool blanket on the cutter's deck and the island had disappeared entirely behind them. In the hours that followed, Serenity Cay erupted into controlled chaos. Floodlights blazed across every path, sirens echoed over the water, black SUVs rolled up the coral roads, and federal agents in tactical gear swarmed the main residence. Victor Kane was taken into custody before the sun rose, still in his silk robe, protesting loudly about misunderstandings and powerful friends, until the handcuffs clicked shut. The other men scattered in panic, some arrested on the spot, others attempting to flee by private jet only to find federal teams waiting at every possible landing field, alerted hours earlier by the distress call that had rippled outward across official channels. The island was immediately sealed off. Hidden cameras were located and confiscated, hard drives ripped from servers, filing cabinets pried open. The remaining girls, Lila, Sage, and those still trapped inside, were evacuated one by one, wrapped in blankets and led to waiting boats under heavy protection. She sat later in the cutter's small galley, still wrapped in the scratchy blanket, sipping hot tea that tasted like something close to absolution, while a female federal agent sat across from her. "That recording you gave us," the agent said quietly. "It's explosive, names, voices, specific dates, instructions. Enough to dismantle half the guest list and probably more. You did this. You made this happen." She looked out through the small porthole at the gray dawn sea stretching endlessly in every direction. "I just stopped pretending," she answered, her voice low but steady. "That was all it took." The agent nodded slowly, a flicker of admiration in her eyes. "Sometimes that's the strongest thing any person can do." Weeks later, back on the mainland, the headlines arrived in relentless waves. Financier's private Caribbean island raided, trafficking and blackmail allegations surface. Explosive audio recordings name high-profile guests in coercion scandal. Survivors break silence. Years of systematic abuse exposed at luxury retreat. Victor Kane faced a litany of charges that, if proven, would keep him behind bars for decades. The senator resigned within hours of the first leaks. Harlan Voss watched his hedge fund implode overnight as investors fled. Lord Blake discovered that even an ancient title offered no shield against extradition requests and public disgrace. She testified first in closed sessions, then in open court when the time came, showing the photograph, playing the recording, naming every name she could remember with calm precision. She did not hide her face. She did not apologize for surviving. And when the victim compensation funds were eventually established from seized assets totaling millions, she accepted her portion, then quietly directed the majority of it toward organizations that helped other women escape similar invisible prisons. Serenity Cay was left to rot. The once pristine villas fell into disrepair, their glass walls cracked by vines and salt air. The helipad buckled under encroaching weeds. The infinity pools turned stagnant and green. Tourists steered clear, and locals began to whisper that the place was cursed, haunted by the echoes of what had happened there. She never returned. But on quiet evenings years afterward, she would sometimes stand on a different beach, public, ordinary, crowded with strangers, and listen to the waves rolling in and out with their timeless rhythm. They no longer carried the sound of a cage closing around her. Instead, they carried proof that one small, hidden recorder, stolen in a single moment of quiet defiance, had proven stronger than all the money, all the power, all the carefully constructed threats. That ordinary courage, refusing at last to bend, could fracture an empire built entirely on enforced silence. And the true turn, the genuine revelation of hidden strength, had never belonged to Victor Kane or any of the men who believed themselves untouchable. It had always belonged to her. The aftermath unfolded with the relentless inevitability of a tide that had finally turned, sweeping away the carefully constructed illusion of invincibility that had protected Victor Kane and his circle for so many years, while simultaneously lifting the veil of silence that had kept dozens of young women trapped in a cycle of coercion, shame, and enforced compliance long after they had left the island. Federal agents, working in close coordination with the Coast Guard and international law enforcement partners, alerted by the distress call that had pierced the night like a flare, descended upon Serenity Cay in the pre-dawn hours with such coordinated precision that resistance proved futile. The security personnel, trained primarily to intimidate rather than to fight, dropped their weapons almost immediately upon seeing the tactical teams emerge from the darkness with floodlights and shouted commands, while the guests, still half-dressed from the previous night's successes, were rounded up one by one, some attempting to flee toward the helipad only to find their private jets already grounded and surrounded. Others simply standing frozen in the villa doorways as handcuffs clicked shut around wrists that had grown accustomed to giving orders rather than receiving them. Victor Kane himself was taken into custody before the first rays of sunlight touched the eastern horizon, still wearing the same silk robe he had donned for the evening's entertainment. His silver hair disheveled and his face contorted in an expression of outraged disbelief as agents read him his rights in calm, unhurried tones that left no room for negotiation or appeal to influence. He protested loudly about mistaken identity, powerful connections in Washington and London, and the certainty that this was all a misunderstanding that could be resolved with a single phone call. Yet the agents merely continued their procedural recitation while leading him toward the waiting black SUV, where he caught one final glimpse of the island that had once represented the pinnacle of his untouchable world, now swarming with uniforms and evidence technicians methodically cataloging every room, every hidden camera, every server rack that held years of incriminating footage. The legal proceedings that followed moved with a speed and thoroughness that surprised even the most seasoned observers. Fueled by the mountain of evidence recovered from the island, hard drives containing thousands of hours of video, audio recordings that captured not only the acts themselves but the casual conversations in which participants discussed logistics, payments, and methods of silencing potential whistleblowers, financial records tracing millions in transfers disguised as consulting fees or modeling contracts, and victim statements that poured in once the first survivors spoke publicly, encouraging others to come forward with accounts that spanned more than a decade. Prosecutors built a case so airtight that plea negotiations collapsed almost before they began. The sheer volume of corroborating material, combined with the public outrage that erupted as excerpts from the recordings leaked through controlled channels to major news outlets, left no viable path for leniency or reduced charges, and Victor Kane ultimately stood trial on multiple counts of sex trafficking of minors, conspiracy to commit racketeering, money laundering, and obstruction of justice, each charge carrying mandatory minimum sentences that ensured he would never again walk free. During the trial, which lasted nearly 9 months and drew saturation media coverage across continents, survivors testified in both closed and open sessions, their voices steady despite the weight of memory as they described the gradual escalation from seemingly generous invitations to inescapable entrapment, the constant drip of cash that served as both lure and leash, the threats delivered with velvet politeness about families and futures, and the nights when resistance was met not with violence but with the colder weapon of recorded humiliation designed to guarantee future compliance. She herself took the stand on the third week, dressed simply in a dark blazer and white blouse, hair pulled back in the same plain style she had worn during her escape, and spoke for nearly 4 hours without once looking away from the jury or flinching when defense counsel attempted to portray her as a willing participant who had accepted lavish payments. She calmly recounted every small humiliation that had accumulated into systematic abuse, produced the tiny recorder she had smuggled out, and played the excerpts that featured Victor's own voice issuing instructions about retention techniques and private cuts for influential clients, effectively dismantling the narrative that this had been anything other than a calculated criminal enterprise masked by wealth and privilege. The verdict came on a gray October afternoon in a federal courthouse in New York. Guilty on all counts. Sentencing followed 6 weeks later, and the judge, after reviewing victim impact statements that filled more than 300 pages, imposed a term of 35 years without possibility of parole, citing the premeditated nature of the offenses, the abuse of extreme power disparity, and the lifelong trauma inflicted on multiple victims who had been lured with promises of opportunity only to find themselves commodified and discarded. Victor Kane, once a fixture in the highest circles of finance and society, was led from the courtroom in shackles. His posture stooped for the first time anyone could remember, the silver hair now fully white and thinning, the confident stride replaced by the slow shuffle of a man who finally understood that no amount of money or connections could buy immunity from consequences when the evidence spoke louder than any defense attorney. Prison proved to be the final, unrelenting equalizer. Transferred to a high-security federal facility in Colorado after the initial period in a New York detention center, he entered a world where his former status meant nothing, and where the hierarchy was determined not by bank accounts or social registers, but by survival instincts honed in far harsher environments than any Caribbean island. Within months, reports filtered out through legal channels and occasional media leaks. He had suffered a series of minor strokes brought on by chronic stress and untreated hypertension, his once impeccable health deteriorating rapidly under the strain of confinement, poor prison diet, and the constant psychological pressure of knowing that every newspaper still carried stories about his downfall. Guards noted that he spent most days in his cell, rarely speaking to other inmates, staring at the concrete wall as though waiting for a reprieve that would never arrive. By the 4th year of his sentence, the strokes had accumulated into something more serious. Medical records later obtained through Freedom of Information requests described a series of transient ischemic attacks followed by a major cerebrovascular event that left him partially paralyzed on the left side and unable to speak coherently. He lingered in the prison infirmary for another 18 months, fed through tubes, his body wasting while his mind, still sharp enough to comprehend the irony, remained trapped inside a failing shell. On a cold February morning in 2024, with no family members present and only a prison chaplain at his bedside, Victor Kane suffered a final massive stroke that proved fatal. He was pronounced dead at 7:42 a.m., aged 76, alone in a stark white room that smelled of antiseptic and regret. His empire reduced to headlines, court transcripts, and the quiet satisfaction of survivors who had outlived the man who once believed he could own them. In the years that followed, Serenity Cay remained abandoned, its once pristine villas overtaken by jungle vines and salt corrosion, the infinity pools filled with stagnant rainwater and algae, the helipad cracked and sprouting weeds like a forgotten monument to hubris. The island was eventually seized by the government as proceeds of crime, sold at auction for a fraction of its former value, and purchased by an environmental nonprofit that razed the remaining structures and replanted native vegetation, transforming the site into a protected marine sanctuary where no trace of the old regime survived except in archives and memory. She never sought the spotlight after the trial concluded. Instead, she lived quietly in a small coastal town far from the headlines, working with survivor advocacy groups, speaking at closed-door conferences when invited, and quietly mentoring young women who had escaped similar traps. The money she received in compensation, substantial after years of litigation against estates and insurers, was mostly channeled into scholarships, safe houses, and legal funds for others still fighting to be heard. On evenings when the weight of memory grew heavy, she would walk along public beaches, listening to waves that no longer whispered entrapment, but instead carried the steady rhythm of freedom earned through refusal to remain silent. And so the story ended not with the dramatic flourish of a single heroic act, but with the slow, inexorable workings of justice that, once set in motion by one woman's refusal to keep pretending, continued forward until every layer of protection around the powerful had been stripped away, every victim had been given voice, and the man who had built an empire on the commodification of others died in obscurity, powerless, forgotten by the world he once believed he owned. The moral remains simple yet unyielding. No amount of wealth, no network of influence, no private island fortified by silence and cameras can forever shield those who prey upon the vulnerable when ordinary courage finally decides it has endured enough. Truth, once spoken, gathers its own momentum. It moves through courtrooms and headlines, through survivor testimonies and recovered evidence, until even the mightiest structures built on coercion begin to crumble under the weight of their own contradictions. And in the end, the quiet act of one person saying no more, armed with nothing more than a stolen recorder, a stolen key, and the determination to stop bending, proved stronger than every dollar and every threat ever deployed against her. Because power, no matter how vast, is always fragile when built upon the enforced silence of others. Remove that silence, and the entire edifice collapses. She had removed it, and the world, listening at last, had never been the same.